Sometimes the greatest danger in the mountains isn't avalanches or blizzards. It's the stubborn refusal to turn back when things don't go according to plan. This is a story about how two people kept going forward, even though every step brought them closer to disaster. About how a chain of small decisions, each seeming reasonable at the time, adds up to a tragedy. Pavlina Pezova and Ondrej Petre flew to New Zealand from the Czech Republic in February 2016. The young couple planned to earn some money, see the beautiful country, and simply relax. Immediately after arriving, they found work picking apples. Monotonous work under the scorching sun, hands sticky with juice, backs aching by the end of the day. But they made enough money. They earned a little and moved on to Queenstown to look for seasonal work for the winter. Ondrej was a professional snowboard instructor, confident in the mountains, and he knew snow. Pavlina hoped to find something in the hospitality industry, a hotel reception, a cafe, something simple. They didn't need a lot of money, just enough to get through the season and continue their travels. But work didn't pan out. Queenstown is full of young adventure seekers just like them, and competition is high. A week of searching, then a second, nothing. So the couple decided not to waste time and go trekking in the surrounding area while they figured out what to do next. They completed several short routes without any problems. Easy day hikes, beautiful views, sunset photos, everything went smoothly. And then they chose something more serious. The Routeburn track. 32 kilometers through mountainous terrain, with its highest point at 1,300 meters above sea level. On the map, it looked quite manageable. The New Zealand Department of Conservation describes this route as a true alpine adventure, leading travelers through glacial valleys to the majestic peaks of the Southern Alps. It sounds romantic. The description includes warnings, but what trail doesn't have warnings? Before setting out, the couple stopped by the Queenstown Visitor Center. An employee, an elderly New Zealander with a faded jacket and tired eyes, looked at them carefully. He asked about their gear. He checked the forecast. He shook his head. "Guys, you'd better not go. The weather is bad, there's a lot of snow, it's not the season." But Pavlina and Ondrej checked the forecast themselves. There hadn't been any heavy snow for a long time. The weather had been relatively stable for the past few days, and according to the website, the trail was in normal condition. They decided to risk it. They didn't want to cancel the hike. Everything was already planned. The route was studied, and their spirits were high. Later, Pavlina would call one of their biggest mistakes the fact that they didn't notify anyone they were heading out on the trail. They didn't register. The reason was simple and foolish at the same time. They didn't want to pay to use the mountain huts. The system there works like this. Tourists register with the local service, get a permit for the trek and access to the shelters. The service monitors to ensure everyone safely exits the trail, and if someone is overdue, they launch a search. There's a small fee for the huts, something around 50 New Zealand dollars a night. For locals, it's pocket change. For young people without jobs, counting every bill, it was a significant expense. They thought, why pay if you can just show up and spend the night? The huts are left unlocked, after all. Pezova would later admit that she and Ondrej had never gone hiking in the mountains in winter, ever. Their only experience was in summer. Sunny trails, warm evenings by the campfire, light backpacks. They had never climbed above the tree line, into the alpine zone, where the wind hits you in the face like a hammer, where the temperature drops 10 degrees in an hour, where snow lies year-round. They thought they could complete the trek without crampons and ice axes. Well, the snow isn't permanent, the trail is packed down, we'll manage. On July 26th, the couple set out on the trail lightly equipped. Without crampons, the metal plates you attach to boots for traction on ice. Without snowshoes, the wide frames that keep you from sinking into soft snow, without ice axes, the poles with a sharp pick used to stop a fall on a slope, without ropes, without carabiners, without a basic mountaineering kit. They didn't even take a tent. They planned to sleep in the huts. They have a roof, walls, bunks. Why carry an extra 2 kilograms? They had come to earn money, and outdoor gear in New Zealand costs a fortune. Quality crampons, $200. An ice axe, another $100. A tent, sleeping bags rated for sub-zero temperatures, another $300 or $400. It was simply out of their budget. They spent the first night in the Falls hut. They reached it in 4 hours from the start of the trail. A good pace, cheerful mood. The hut was simple. A wooden cabin, an iron stove, several bunks along the walls. Cold, but bearable. Dinner from packets, tea, talk of their plans. Andre joked, made plans for the future. They fell asleep in their sleeping bags, listening to the wind rustling through the treetops outside. The next morning, around 10, they packed up and moved on. They left the forest zone, and the views immediately opened up. Mountains all around, snow-capped peaks, blue sky, beautiful. But within half an hour, it became clear. Something was wrong. The forecast had seemed acceptable, but the usual 1-hour walk to the Harris Saddle Shelter stretched to 5 hours. The snow was waist-deep. Not a packed trail, not a firm crust, but a loose mass that you sink into up to your thigh, and sometimes deeper. Walking through snow like that isn't a stroll. It's hard work. Every step, lift your leg, sink, pull it out, another step. Thighs burn, calves cramp, breath shortens. A pause every 10 meters. Andre went first, breaking the trail, and Pavlina followed, trying to step exactly in his tracks. But even that didn't help much. The snow still gave way. By noon, both were exhausted. Faces red from exertion, clothes wet with sweat despite the cold. Backs ached under the weight of their packs, straps digging into their shoulders. Pavlina stopped several times, bending over, trying to catch her breath. Andre waited in silence, then started walking again. It was already clear by then that something had gone wrong. This was supposed to be an easy day. 3 hours of walking at most, a calm pace, enjoying the scenery. Instead, it turned into an exhausting slog through a snowy mush. But they decided, turning back was more dangerous than going forward. The logic was simple. The same snow was behind them, the same 5 hours. Why waste their energy? They reached the Harris Saddle Shelter around 3 p.m. A sign on the wall indicated 3 hours walk to the Mackenzie hut, 3 hours under normal conditions. They exchanged glances. They decided the hardest part was behind them, that it would be easier from here on, with less snow and a better packed trail. It was an illusion, but at that moment they believed it. They could have stayed at the Harris Saddle Shelter for the night, rested, regained their strength, and decided in the morning whether to continue or turn back. But they pushed on. They decided to reach the next hut before dark. The daylight was already fading, but 3 hours isn't that long, right? And this was the key moment of the story. They saw they lacked experience. They saw their gear was insufficient. They understood that things were not going according to plan at all. They could have returned to the village, or at least spent the night here, in the Harris Saddle Shelter, and in the morning, after resting, decide whether to go on or back. But they chose to move forward. Even though daylight was ending, even though their strength was failing, even though the snow was still there. This was the wrong turn. By 5 p.m., it was completely dark. In winter in the southern latitudes, darkness falls quickly, not a gentle sunset, but a sudden switching off of the light. 1 minute you can still see the outlines of the slopes, and the next, there is blackness all around. The weather deteriorated sharply. Fog rolled in, a dense, milky veil in which everything dissolves. The wind picked up. Not just a breeze, but a real mountain gale that cuts through your jacket, gets under your hood, and burns your cheeks. The temperature dropped by 10 degrees in about an hour. They walked with headlamps. Narrow cones of light snatched a meter of space ahead from the darkness. White snow, protruding branches, nothing more. Beyond that, blackness. You couldn't see where the trail was, couldn't see where to go. The markers that are clearly visible during the day, orange poles at junctions, were now lost in the darkness and fog. Pavlina walked, looking at her feet, counting her steps. 10 steps, a pause, another 10. Her breathing was ragged, a stitch in her chest. Her legs were giving way. André was ahead, his figure flickering at the edge of the headlamp's light, now appearing, now disappearing into the fog. She shouted something to him, but the wind carried her words away. Due to the poor visibility, they could no longer make out the trail markers. They lost the trail. They started walking blindly. Downwards, it seemed, towards the lake, but where exactly was down? The slope was all around, with many possible directions. They quickly got lost. After walking for some time, they came to a familiar landmark. They recognized a tree they had already passed. They were walking in circles. Their strength was fading, and panic began to creep in. André stopped, took off his backpack, and sat down in the snow. "Stop. We can't go any further. Let's wait until morning." Pavlina nodded. She had no strength to argue. Completely exhausted and unsure of where to go, they decided to stop for the night, to wait for dawn. They had no tent. They had to find some kind of shelter. They found an overhanging rock that formed a small niche underneath. Not a cave, but at least some protection from the wind. They unrolled their sleeping bags, summer ones, rated for +5 degrees Celsius. Outside, it was around -10, and with the wind chill, more like -20. The sleeping bags couldn't keep them warm. They got into them fully clothed, jackets, fleeces, hats, gloves. Pavlina lay with her back to André, trying to conserve some heat. The snowfall intensified. Large flakes flew horizontally, the wind blowing under the rock. Snow fell on their sleeping bags, got into the gaps between their jackets and hoods, melted on their necks, and trickled down as an icy stream. Pavlina tightened the drawstrings, burrowing deeper into her sleeping bag, but it was little use. The cold seeped in everywhere. First, her toes went numb, losing all feeling. Then her hands. She clenched her fists, tucked them under her armpits, rubbed them. It helped for a short while. Then her whole body began to shiver. A fine tremor that couldn't be stopped, muscles contracting on their own, trying to generate heat. Pavlina didn't sleep all night. She was afraid they would be buried by snow in their sleep, that they would suffocate without waking. She lay there, listening to the howling wind, shivering, staring into the darkness. Time dragged on endlessly. Every hour felt like an eternity. André, beside her, wasn't sleeping either. She could hear him shifting, hear his teeth chattering. Sometimes he would say something, but she couldn't make out the words. The wind drowned them out. But somehow they survived. By morning, the wind had died down, and the snowfall had stopped. Pavlina crawled out of her sleeping bag. Her body was stiff, every muscle ached, her joints cracked. André emerged after her. His face was blue, his lips almost purple. His hands were shaking, a fine tremor he couldn't stop, clear signs of hypothermia. She asked him how he was. He mumbled something unintelligible, waved his hand as if to say he was fine, but his voice trembled and his gaze was somewhat vacant. The weather improved, the sun came out, the fog lifted and visibility returned, and they saw the hut, so close. Maybe a kilometer and a half at most, down below by Lake Mackenzie, so very close. They just needed to descend a fairly steep slope. A wave of joy washed over them. Saved. They'd made it. Soon there would be warmth, food, rest. Pavlina even smiled for the first time in 24 hours. The marked trail zigzagged down to the lake. It was steep, about 40 degrees, and covered in a thick layer of snow. Following the zigzags would take a long time. It would be quicker to cut straight down. The couple decided to take a shortcut. It made sense. Why meander when you can go straight? This was a mistake. Having lost their bearings, they walked not down toward the lake, but up the valley. The slopes looked similar. There were few landmarks, the sun was at an unfamiliar angle, and after 5 minutes, you no longer knew where you were. Eventually, they ended up on a spur of a huge cliff, a dead end. Beyond it, a sheer drop. They turned around and headed back. The weather worsened again, as if it had been waiting for them to choose the wrong direction. The fog returned, the wind grew stronger, and it started to snow again. They descended and found their own tracks. They were walking in circles again. Andre took off his outer ski pants, said they were hindering his movement, that they were heavy. In reality, this was already a warning sign. Hypothermia affects judgment, and people start doing strange things. After a difficult night, after 5 hours of slogging through snow the day before, after several hours of wandering today, both were at their limit. Their strength was gone. Their bodies were running on autopilot, pure adrenaline and survival instinct. On top of that, it got very cold. The temperature dropped even lower. The wind intensified, chilling them to the bone. They began to freeze again. They struggled forward in the darkness, Pavlina in front, Andre behind her. She turned around every few minutes to check if he was still coming. He was walking, but slowly, dragging his feet. They tried to encourage each other. "Come on, just a little further. The hut is close. Hang in there. It'll be warm soon." But the words sounded hollow. They didn't even believe them themselves. Eventually, they stopped by another overhanging rock. Andre simply collapsed onto the snow. "I'll wait here. Go, find the trail, and come back for me." Pavlina looked at him. His face was pale, his lips blue, his gaze clouded. He was in worse shape. He was carrying the heavy backpack. The sleeping bags were soaked, had absorbed water, and now weighed about 10 kilograms, plus the food, plus the spare clothes. Pavlina recalls that his gear was so heavy she couldn't lift his backpack off the ground. She tried to pick it up. It wouldn't budge, as if it were glued to the earth. The woman set off to find the way. She walked, peering into the darkness, searching for any familiar landmarks. But the strong wind and snow made it impossible to see anything more than 5 meters ahead. A white veil all around, earth and sky merging into one. About 20 minutes later, she decided to return to Andre. She reached the rock, and she saw a strange sight. Her boyfriend had taken off his down jacket. just took it off and threw it on the snow beside him. He was standing in a thin fleece top and shouting something incoherent. "This is so fucking cool! Yeah, just like this!" Pavlina stopped, not understanding what was happening. Looking at his blue lips, at the crazed glint in his eyes, she asked, "What are you doing? Why did you take your jacket off?" Andrei looked at her, smiled a strange smile. "Everything's great. The jacket's heavy. I'm hot." Hot? At -15 degrees Celsius, in a blizzard, at an altitude of over 1,000 meters. This is actually a classic sign of hypothermia, paradoxical undressing. When the body's core temperature drops below a critical point, the blood vessels in the skin suddenly dilate. Blood rushes to the surface, and the person feels unbearably hot. They start tearing off their clothes, even as they are actually dying of cold. The cold affects not only the limbs, but also the brain. A freezing person loses control of their actions, their logic breaks down, and their judgment becomes distorted. They suddenly feel that everything is fine, that they are safe, that they can relax. But this only means that the end is near. The body is giving up. Pavlina picked up the jacket and tried to put it back on him. He pushed her away, saying he didn't need it, that he was fine as he was. She insisted. Eventually, he agreed, pulled on the jacket, but didn't zip it up. Despite everything, they continued on. They were still convinced they would reach the hut. Logic was no longer working. They moved on autopilot, simply because standing still meant freezing to death. Pavlina saw the crest of the ridge ahead. She thought the descent to the lake must be behind it. She went first, with Andrei following, step by step, slowly, with stops. By this point, his condition had become critical. Pavlina would turn around. He was walking like a robot, mechanically moving his legs, his gaze vacant. His speech became incoherent. He was talking nonsense, something about home, about warmth, calling out the names of people who weren't there. Sometimes he would stop and bite trees. He would just walk up to a trunk and sink his teeth into the bark. Pavlina watched this, not knowing what to do. She called to him, pulled his sleeve. He would let go of the tree and walk on. Late-stage hypothermia. The brain had almost shut down. They continued to descend without a trail, at random. They hoped they would reach the lake any moment. And then the snow cornice they were walking on collapsed. Suddenly, without warning, the ground simply gave way beneath their feet. A fall, a somersault, snow in the face, hitting rocks, scratched by branches. Pavlina screamed, trying to grab onto something, but she just tumbled in the snowslide. 20 meters, maybe 30, it was hard to tell at that speed. She stopped abruptly, crashing into a snowdrift. She lay there for a few seconds without moving, collecting herself. Her whole body ached, her head was ringing. Slowly, she got onto all fours. She looked around. Her headlamp was gone. It had flown off during the fall. One of her gloves was also missing. Her left hand was bare, and her fingers were already starting to go numb. But her bones were intact. Nothing was broken. She was lucky. She remembered Andrei. She hurried to him. He was lying about 10 meters away. He was conscious, his eyes were open, but he was stuck between branches and rocks. His backpack was still on his back, a heavy burden that had wedged him into a crevice between boulders. Pavlina ran up and knelt beside him. "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" He answered, yes, but his voice sounded strange, hoarse, strained. She saw that he was tightly wedged between two rocks and the trunks of young trees. The backpack was pressing down from above, pushing his chest against the sharp edge of the lower rock. It was hard for him to breathe. The woman tried to move him. She grabbed his shoulders and pulled. He didn't budge. She tried to take off the backpack. The straps were somewhere underneath him. She couldn't reach them. Andre also tried to get out, pushed with his legs, tried to push himself free. It seemed he only got more stuck. The heavy backpack and the branches had created a trap. The more he moved, the tighter he became wedged. Under the pressure of the backpack and branches, he began to suffocate. His chest was compressed. Air couldn't get through. Pavlina remembers the horrifying gasps. Not moans, not screams, but gasps, like a drowning man. She tried to free him. She dug at the snow around him with her hands, tried to clear the branches, pulled on his shoulders with all her might. The fingers of her bare hand were numb, disobedient, but his body wouldn't move. It was as if he were frozen to the rocks. How much time passed? 5 minutes? 10? Time had lost all meaning. The gasps fell silent. His breathing stopped. She took the second headlamp from his backpack, a spare that was in a side pocket. She turned it on and shone it in Andre's face. His eyes were open, unseeing. She placed her fingers on his neck, searching for a pulse. Nothing. Andre was dead. Pavlina was left alone. In the night, in the mountains, covered by a meter-deep layer of snow, with the dead body of her boyfriend beside her, without food, without communication, without any idea of where she was. Taking the sleeping bag from Andre's pack, hers was soaked. This one was more or less dry. She unrolled it next to his body. She climbed inside. She spent another freezing night next to the deceased, listening to the howling wind and her own breathing. The next morning, at dawn, she forced herself to get up. Her body was numb. It hurt to move. She looked at Andre. Overnight, he had been dusted with snow, as if by a shroud. She took everything from his backpack that might be useful. A little food, 2 muesli bars, a bag of nuts, spare socks, a flashlight, a survival blanket, a thin metallic film that retains some heat. She left her own backpack, taking only the essentials in a small waste pack. She moved on. Where to? She didn't know. Just down, towards the lake, towards the hut she had seen yesterday. It had to be somewhere around here. She pushed through bushes and over broken rocks. Every step was a struggle. Her muscles were sore. Her knees wouldn't bend. Her head spun from exhaustion and dehydration. Visibility remained poor. The fog didn't lift. Low clouds clung to the slopes. The deep snow sapped her last reserves of strength. She sank up to her thigh, sometimes to her waist. She would pull her leg out, take a step, and sink again. 10 meters, a pause, catch her breath. Another 10 meters, a pause, all day long. On top of that, she had lost both her gloves. Her hands were freezing. She tucked them under her jacket, under her armpits, rubbed them. It helped for a short while. Then they would turn to ice again. Her fingers went numb. Her skin turned white. Frostbite was setting in. Darkness fell again. The days were short. It got dark early. And another night under an overhanging rock. The third in these 4 days. She unrolled the wet sleeping bag and climbed inside fully clothed. She put on everything she had. 2 t-shirts, a fleece, a down jacket, and a rain jacket on top. She wrapped herself in the survival blanket, a crinkling film that held in a little bit of warmth. All night, she rubbed her numb hands and feet, fighting off frostbite. She massaged her fingers, bent and straightened them, trying to maintain blood flow. She knew, if she let it go, she would lose her limbs, or die. It was the third night of fighting for her life, on what was supposed to be an easy 3-day summer trail. The next day, the fourth since the start of the hike, Pizova finally saw the hut in the valley, clearly not in the fog. A wooden structure on the shore of Lake Mackenzie, the destination they had been striving for. She forced herself to move faster before the weather turned bad again. She descended, grabbing onto branches, stumbling over rocks. The main thing was not to lose sight of the hut. She reached Lake Mackenzie, black water, covered with a thin crust of ice near the shores. She began to walk along the bank over wet rocks. The stones were slippery, covered with ice and moss. From physical exhaustion, 4 days with almost no food, no sleep, at the limit of her strength, the toe of her boot caught on a ledge and she lost her balance. She slipped on a wet rock and fell into the icy water of the lake. The shock of the cold. The water was 3 degrees, no more, glacial. It took her breath away, her muscles seized with cramps. For a second, she thought, this is it, the end. But her survival instinct kicked in. She felt for the bottom, pushed off, and climbed out onto the bank. All her clothes were soaked through. Water streamed from her jacket, from her hair, filled her boots. Her body shook with cold. She continued on, barely perceiving reality. Her vision was blurry, her thoughts were confused. Her legs moved on their own, autopilot. With her last ounce of strength, she reached the hut by noon. The door was right in front of her. Salvation was 2 steps away. She walked up, pulled the handle. Locked. She pushed with her shoulder. It wouldn't give. Locked shut. It was the off-season. The park warden's hut was empty. No one was there. In desperation, she looked around and found a rock the size of her fist. She went to the window. Without hesitation, she shattered the glass. The tinkle of shards, then silence. She knocked out the remaining glass with the sleeve of her jacket. She reached her arm inside, felt for the latch, and opened it. She climbed through the frame, cutting her leg on a shard. She fell to the floor, lay there for a few seconds without moving. Then she got up and looked around. It turned out to be a comfortable cabin, not a Spartan shelter for tourists, but a real home where the National Park Warden lives during the season. Inside, Pizova found an iron stove, a supply of firewood by the wall, and large stocks of food, canned goods, grains, pasta, tea, sugar, warm clothes on hangers, blankets on the bed, a kerosene lamp, matches. After starting a fire in the stove, her hands trembled. The matches kept dropping, but she managed on the 3rd try. She stripped off her wet clothes. She stood naked in front of the stove, shaking all over, letting the heat warm her frozen body. Slowly, gradually, she began to warm up. She examined her body. It was covered in severe bruises, blue, purple, yellow, traces of falls and impacts with rocks, deep cuts on her arms and legs, some of them bleeding. Her hands and feet were frostbitten. The skin was white, waxy, with blisters in some places. But she was alive. Alive. Wrapped in a dry, warm blanket, she found a bed, lay down, and fell into oblivion. Not sleep, but a shutdown. Her body simply turned off. She spent several days recovering. She would wake up, not knowing where she was. She would get up, go to the stove, add more wood, find food, cook something simple, porridge on water, tea. She would eat, then fall back asleep. Her frostbitten limbs ached unbearably. A throbbing, burning pain, especially as feeling started to return. She took painkillers from a first aid kit she found in a cupboard. It didn't help much. On the third day, she tried to leave the hut, to walk along the trail toward people. She thought, maybe I can make it. I feel a bit stronger. She walked about 100 meters and fell into snow almost up to her chest. She realized she wouldn't make it. She had no strength. The frostbite made it hard to walk. She went back. Every day she hoped someone would come. Other tourists, the park warden, anyone. But days, then weeks passed. No one. Absolute silence. Only the wind and the occasional cry of a bird. Occasionally, planes flew over the cabin. Small tourist aircraft, scenic flights for the wealthy. The woman would run out into the yard, waving a red jacket tied to a long stick. She screamed, waved her arms, but the planes didn't descend, didn't change course. They didn't notice her. They fly too high, too fast. A lone figure on the snow is impossible to spot. She scooped the ash from the stove, gray, fine, easily visible on the white snow. She went outside and laid out the Latin letter H on the snow, huge, 10 meters across. H, the symbol for a helicopter landing pad, an international distress signal. Maybe they would see it from the air. She made several more attempts to get out on her own. On the 6th day, the 10th, the 15th. Each time she was stopped by her injuries, the snow, or the weather. She would return, realizing she was seriously stuck here. More than 20 days had passed, 3 weeks in complete isolation. She began to feel that she would never be found, that she would die here, in this hut, and her body would only be discovered the following summer. She found tools in a shed, a saw, a hammer, nails, wire. She decided to make makeshift snowshoes and crampons. She sawed planks into strips, bent the wire, and tied the contraption together with rope. The result vaguely resembled snowshoes. She put them on and went out to test them. She walked about 20 meters. The contraption fell apart. The ropes couldn't hold. The boards cracked. She went back, tried to fix it. It didn't work. She also saw several powerful avalanches come down near the hut. Huge torrents of snow, wiping out everything in their path. The roar lasted for a minute, then silence. It terrified her. She realized even if she got onto the trail, she could be caught in an avalanche. It wasn't safe. All this time, she kept a diary. She found a notebook and a pencil in a desk drawer. She wrote every day, to keep from going mad, to distract herself from dark thoughts, from the thought of death, from the image of Andre trapped among the rocks. She wrote a lot about him. She remembered what he was like. Kind, considerate, always ready to help. She called him a natural-born rescuer. She recalled how he would always stop to help those in need. A stranger on the road, a lost tourist, an injured animal. And now he lay dead somewhere up there, on the slope, trapped among rocks and trees, covered in snow. And no one knew, and there was no one to help. Her rescue came about by chance, pure luck. The Czech consul, who lived near Queenstown, was scrolling through Facebook one evening, just idly. She noticed a post from concerned relatives. They were looking for 2 Czechs, Pavlina and Andre, who had gone missing in New Zealand. They had last been in touch a month ago. They weren't answering calls, weren't writing. Had anyone seen them? The consul became concerned. She passed the information to the Department of Conservation. They checked their databases. No registrations for any trails, no permits, no hut bookings. but maybe they were somewhere else in the country and had just lost their phone. The search began. They questioned their employers, who confirmed that the young people had last been in contact at the end of July. They checked their bank cards. No transactions. The couple was finally declared missing. The police began a search. They found their van at the parking lot at the start of the Routeburn track. Inside, their belongings, documents. That meant they were on the trail. But on which section? A helicopter with searchers flew over the route. They scanned the trail from beginning to end, looked into the huts. Empty. They searched for tracks, signs, any indication of people's presence. Flying over Lake Mackenzie, the pilot noticed movement below. He descended. He saw a woman waving her arms and calling for help. The helicopter landed near the hut. Rescuers ran to Pavlina. She stood there, swaying on her feet, crying. Pavlina Pizova was saved, a month after setting out on the trail. Andrei's body was found the next day. A search party went up based on Pavlina's description, found the site of the fall, and combed the slope. He was buried in snow up to his waist, trapped between young trees and rocks, exactly as she had described. His body was airlifted out. Pavlina was taken to Queenstown Hospital. Third-degree frostbite on her hands and feet, dehydration, exhaustion, multiple cuts and bruises. She spent 2 weeks in the hospital. 2 days after her rescue, while still in the hospital, Pizova gave a press conference. Queenstown Police Station, a small room, journalists with cameras. She looked terrible, gaunt, pale, her hands bandaged. She read from a piece of paper, periodically stopping, crying, wiping her eyes. Her psychological state was on the brink. The doctors were against it, but she insisted. Concluding her speech, she said, "Anyone who goes into the New Zealand mountains in winter needs to take the changeable weather and winter conditions seriously. The mountains here do not forgive mistakes." She called their main mistake the fact that they hadn't told anyone about their hike. Only $100, but it can save a life. They hadn't taken the right gear. They had underestimated the weather and their own strength. The police later published an official report. It stated directly, Andrei's clothing and equipment were not suitable for such a route. The clothing was too light, perhaps suitable for a few hours' walk in good weather, but certainly not for a multi-day winter trek in the mountains at an altitude of over 1,000 meters. Rescuers noted that the woman was very lucky with the hut. Usually, leaving food in shelters is prohibited. It attracts rodents which chew through wiring and damage property. But she had the good fortune to come across the park warden's cabin, a residential dwelling with far more resources than typical tourist shelters: food supplies for several months, firewood, clothes, tools. This is what allowed her to hold out for almost a month. The police report is quite critical of Pavlina Pizova's decisions. I will quote it directly. It appears Andrei and Pizova did not consider alternatives, only moving forward along the route, no matter what. This strange determination, bordering on stubbornness, lies at the heart of the decision to continue on to Lake Mackenzie, instead of staying at the Harris Saddle Shelter or returning to the Falls Hut. The desire to reach the lake at all costs led them to skip breakfast, set out on the trail immediately, and descend an unmarked spur in poor visibility. It seems Andrei acted as the leader of the hike and made most of the critical decisions. The couple considered themselves experienced hikers, so they decided they could handle the trail, despite direct advice from park staff not to go. Despite the fact that Pizova was aware of her partner's increasing hypothermia, bluish skin, shivering, incoherent speech, paradoxical undressing, she apparently took no effective action to treat him and thought that reaching the hut was the only option for survival. Pizova should have abandoned the search for the hut in the dark and blizzard and found a place to immediately take shelter from the wind and snow, build a fire, and warm Andrei. This would have given them a chance of rescue. The same report concludes, although the immediate cause of Andrei Peter's death is considered to be severe hypothermia exacerbated by mechanical asphyxia, there were numerous opportunities to make decisions that would almost certainly have led to a different outcome. When the story became public, commentators on the internet often blamed Pavlina for her partner's death. They wrote harshly, without pity. She saw him freezing but did nothing. She kept dragging him forward even though he could no longer walk. Why didn't they stop, build a fire, get warm? Some went even further, proposing conspiracy theories. They suggested that Andrei was alive when Pavlina left him, trapped, and went to find the hut, that she could have saved him but got scared, abandoned him, thinking only of herself. They based this on the coroner's findings. The man died from hypothermia, not from asphyxiation due to his position. This meant, theoretically, he could have been alive for some time after getting stuck. But this is speculation. Pavlina said she checked his pulse and there was none. Whether to believe her or not is up to each individual to decide. The unwillingness to listen to the advice of park staff. The unwillingness to retreat when it became clear the weather conditions were more difficult than expected. The unwillingness to prepare properly for the hike, even though it was clear their gear was insufficient. Skimping on registration and emergency communications. All of this combined put them in a deadly situation. But to criticize the traumatized woman too harshly is perhaps unfair. She was also exhausted to her limit, frozen, under extreme stress. Her brain was not functioning well. Hypothermia affects judgment, the ability to make decisions. To demand thoughtful, rational actions from her in such a state, while perhaps correct from the perspective of survival manuals, is cruel from a human standpoint. It's easy to judge sitting in a warm house with a cup of tea in hand. It's much harder when you are in a blizzard, in the dark, when your hands are numb from cold, when every step is an effort of will. This is a story about how a chain of small mistakes, each seeming insignificant, adds up to a catastrophe. How a stubborn refusal to turn back, to admit that the plan has failed, can lead to tragedy. The mountains do not forgive carelessness. They do not forgive stubbornness. They do not forgive skimping on safety. But it seems to me the most important lesson of this story is not in the technical details: what gear to take, how not to get lost, what to do in case of hypothermia. It's in the psychology. In that moment when you have to stop and say to yourself, "Stop. Something is going wrong. It's dangerous to go on. We're turning back." This is the hardest decision in the mountains. To turn back when you've already come halfway. To retreat when the goal is close. To admit you made a mistake, that you miscalculated your strength. But sometimes it's the only right decision, the one that saves your life.